A millionaire saw two girls crying at his ex-wife's grave. He was stunned by their identity. "Stay with me till the very end, and let me know where you're watching from, so I can see how far the truth really spreads." He came only to say goodbye, but what he found at the grave left him frozen. Nathaniel Harris stepped out of his car and saw two little girls kneeling by a headstone, their small hands arranging flowers, their faces painfully familiar. They called the woman buried there their mother, and in that moment Nate felt the ground shift beneath him. The summer air pressed heavy against his skin as he walked closer, his chest tightening with each step. He had told himself this trip was nothing more than a farewell to Emily, the woman he once loved and lost. Years had passed since the divorce, years since grief pulled them apart after the death of their first child. Nate had drowned in work, flying from city to city, hiding in meetings and airports. Meanwhile, Emily stayed in the silence of their home, carrying her sorrow alone. Nights grew longer for her when she waited at the window, hoping he would come home, only to realize his heart had already drifted. She had begged for connection in small ways he ignored. A note left on his desk, an untouched dinner going cold, the sound of her crying muffled in the bedroom while he pretended to finish late reports. She had carried both her grief and his until the loneliness became unbearable. By the time the papers were signed, the distance between them had already swallowed everything they once were. He had not known she was sick. The news of her death had come not from family but through an online obituary, just a few short lines that hit harder than any blow. For nights he lay awake, guilt clawing at him, replaying every moment he chose, work over her, over them. At last he could no longer breathe under the weight of it and drove back to the small town he had left behind, to the grave he thought would bring closure. But closure was the last thing waiting for him. Just steps away, two little girls, no older than 5, knelt in the grass. Their brown hair glistened in the light, their eyes wide and unguarded, eyes that mirrored his own. One clutched a folded letter. The other gripped wildflowers far too big for her small hands. Nate's breath caught in his chest. They were not strangers. They were the daughters Emily never told him about. Nate's heart raced as he tried to take another step toward the little girls. Every part of him wanted to kneel down, to speak, to tell them he had come too late, but he was here now. His lips parted, but before he could utter a word, a voice struck him like thunder. Rachel appeared, her arms wrapping fiercely around the girls, her eyes burning into his. Her first words caught in her throat, half scream, half sob. She asked how he dared to stand there. Her voice cracked, but the anger behind it was sharp. She said Emily had died, carrying everything alone. She said nights had been filled with muffled crying while he hid in meetings and flights. The words spilled out, but every few seconds she faltered, her breath breaking, as if each accusation tore her as well. The children clung to her. Lucy buried her face in Rachel's sleeve, her small voice trembling as she whispered Aunt Rachel, "Don't let him near." Lila's body shook, her tiny fingers digging into Rachel's arm like she feared being taken away. Their fear pierced deeper than any word could. Nate's knees weakened as he saw their trembling shoulders. They did not see a father. They saw a stranger. He tried to speak, his voice raw, almost begging. He said he hadn't known, that if he had known, he would have been there. But Rachel's eyes flared, and she cut him off. She said Emily never told him because she knew, because his absence had already spoken louder than any confession. The girls whimpered at the rise in her voice, and Rachel pulled them closer, shielding them with her body. Nate's chest ached as he looked at them. He remembered Emily's smile from years ago, her soft voice calling him home, and now saw only two frightened faces that carried her features but turned away from him. Rachel's tears finally broke free, streaking her cheeks even as her voice stayed hard. She told him they had already lost everything. She would not allow him to break them further. Her final words were cold. "Leave. Do not come back." The children were crying openly now. Lucy hiccuped, her small voice calling Rachel again and again. Lila shook her head without lifting her eyes, whispering that she wanted to go home. The sound shattered him. Nate's hands trembled at his sides, his throat closing. He wanted to fall to his knees, to plead with them, to reach out, but the sight of their fear bound him in silence. Rachel turned, her arms locked tight around them. She walked away, her steps heavy with fury and grief. The children clung to her like lifelines, never looking back. Nate stood frozen, his breath jagged, watching until their figures slipped beyond the gate. Shame burned in his chest. He had come for closure, but what he found was rejection. 2 daughters who feared him, and a sister who despised him. He turned back to the grave, the stone cold and silent before him. His voice cracked as he whispered to Emily that he was sorry. The words dissolved in the wind, carried away before they could reach her. Alone among the graves, Nate felt the truth settle heavy on his shoulders. He had not only lost Emily, he had lost the family he never knew he had. Nate could not stay away. Every evening he returned to Rachel's house, his voice breaking as he begged her to let him see the girls. Each time she shut the door in his face. She told him he had made his choice years ago, that Emily had begged for his presence when she was alive, and he had been too busy chasing wealth to care. One night, the skies opened, and rain poured down in heavy sheets. Still, Nate did not leave. He knelt on the porch, rain soaking his suit, his hair plastered to his forehead. He whispered Emily's name, whispered apologies, whispered the word daughters, as if the rain could carry his voice inside. Hours passed. The street grew quiet. His body trembled from the cold, but he stayed. By dawn, Rachel opened the door. She found him on his knees, shivering, his lips pale, his eyes swollen from tears. For a moment, anger burned in her chest again, but then she remembered Emily's letter. With a sigh, she disappeared inside and returned with an envelope. She pressed it into his hands without a word. Nate's fingers shook as he opened it. Emily's handwriting stared back at him. She had written that she discovered she was pregnant soon after the divorce, that pride had kept her from calling him, but she had never stopped hoping he would one day find them. She asked only one thing: "If you ever see them, please love them, even if you cannot forgive me." Rachel's eyes filled with tears as she watched him. She said she hated him for what Emily endured, but Emily's last words could not be ignored. Against every instinct, she allowed him one day with the girls. Nate's heart soared with a fragile hope he had not felt in years. The day began beautifully. He took them for ice cream, bought small toys, and listened as Lucy's chatter filled the car. Even Lila, shy and quiet, glanced at him with curiosity when he helped her choose a book from the store. For a few hours, he felt like he had been given a family again, but his phone rang. A client demanded his attention. Old habits won. He led the girls into a crowded mall, telling them to stay close while he handled a quick call. When he turned, only Lucy was there. Lila was gone. Panic seized him. He tore through the crowd, calling her name, his voice raw with fear. For endless minutes he imagined the worst. When he found her near a toy display, crying, he fell to his knees, pulling her against him. He whispered apology after apology, his tears mixing with hers. She clung to him, trembling, while Lucy stood frozen, too frightened to speak. Relief came, but it was short-lived. By the time Rachel heard what had happened, her fury exploded. She accused him of proving everything she had feared, that he was careless, that he was too absorbed in his world to protect them. Her voice shook with rage as she declared she would go to court and fight for custody. The door slammed in his face again. This time it carried more than rejection. It carried a sentence. Nate stood in the rain once more, but now it was not just water drenching him. It was the weight of failure, the taste of losing what he had just begun to hold. The night Rachel slammed the door and vowed to take him to court still echoed in Nate's chest days later. The rain had dried, but its chill clung to him. When the official papers finally arrived, folded inside a stark white envelope, his hands trembled as he opened them. The summons was real. He was being called to prove his worth, not in words whispered at gravesides or on porches, but in front of a judge who would decide the future of his daughters. He sat at his kitchen table with the papers spread before him. The ink blurred as his eyes burned. He thought of Emily, of the letter she had left, and of the way Lila had clutched his sleeve when he found her lost in the mall. Shame surged again, but this time it did not paralyze him. It steadied him. He told himself he would not run. For once in his life, he would face the storm, even if it broke him apart. The morning of the hearing arrived heavy with tension. Nate walked up the courthouse steps, each footfall feeling like judgment. Inside, the room was small, with plain beige walls and wooden benches that groaned under shifting weight. He sat at one table, his back straight, but his hands trembling under the surface. Across from him, Rachel sat tall, her jaw tight, eyes red from nights of sleeplessness. She had carried Emily's pain for years, and she was ready to carry this fight too. Rachel spoke first. Her voice rang strong, but cracks of grief bled through every sentence. She told the judge how Emily had battled illness in silence. She described long nights when Emily's body failed her, yet she still held her daughters close and whispered songs through tears. Rachel said Emily worked through exhaustion, smiling at the girls while her body broke down. Then her tone hardened. She said Nate had chosen absence, hiding in work while Emily cried alone, and when given one chance, he had failed, losing Lila in a crowded mall. The courtroom grew still, her words lingering like smoke. Nate lifted his head, his face pale, his chest aching as though the accusations carved into him. He did not interrupt, he did not deny. When it was his turn, he rose slowly, gripping the table to steady his shaking legs. His voice was low at first, but steady. He admitted his failures. He admitted he drowned himself in work to escape grief, and in doing so, abandoned Emily. He said losing Lila had been the worst moment of his life, because it showed him how close he came to repeating every mistake. Then his voice softened. He spoke not of himself but of the girls. He said Lucy giggled when she ate strawberries, but pushed away blueberries with a stubborn frown. He said Lila could not sleep unless she held her sister's hand, that both hummed the same tune their mother once loved when they were scared. They were small details, fragile truths, only a father would notice. His voice cracked as he promised he could never undo the years he had lost. But he would spend the rest of his life proving they would never be abandoned again. The judge leaned back, her pen pausing mid-air. Even Rachel faltered, her eyes flickering though her jaw stayed tight. She had hated him for years, but the way he spoke of the children pierced her certainty. The silence stretched heavy until the judge finally spoke. She acknowledged Rachel's sacrifice, the years she carried both Emily and the girls. But she also acknowledged the bond Nate had begun to build, fragile but real. She said this was not a question of punishment for the past, but a decision for the future. And in that moment, everyone in the room understood. The battle was no longer about who had failed. It was about who could love the girls best now. The room was so still that every breath seemed to echo. The judge looked between Nate and Rachel, her eyes tired yet gentle, and read the decision. Custody would be granted to Nathaniel Harris, but Rachel Miller would remain a close guardian, allowed to be part of the children's daily lives. The words landed like a bell ringing in both their hearts. Nate lowered his head, overcome with relief, his shoulders shaking as though a weight had been lifted after years of silence. Rachel sat frozen, her lips pressed tight. She had fought with everything inside her, carrying Emily's memory like a shield, only to feel it slipping from her hands. For a moment, bitterness burned hot, but then she saw Nate's face. Not arrogant, not triumphant, only broken and grateful. She remembered the letter Emily had left, the words about hoping he would find the girls and love them. Slowly, the heat in her chest softened into something else. When the judge dismissed the court, Rachel stood and faced Nate. Her voice was tired, but no longer sharp. She said the children needed him, but they would always need her too, and he nodded quickly, unable to stop the tears in his eyes. The fight that had once divided them now felt like a bridge. Emily was gone, but her daughters were not. For the first time, Rachel let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could build something together out of love rather than anger. Outside, the afternoon light spilled across the courthouse steps. Nate stepped into it, holding the papers, his heart racing with both joy and fear of what lay ahead. But when Rachel walked beside him, steady but no longer an enemy, he felt a fragile hope grow inside. For the first time, the path forward did not feel like punishment. It felt like the beginning of a chance Emily had always wished for. Nate bought a small house on a quiet street not far from Rachel's. It was nothing like the glass towers and penthouses he had lived in before, but this one felt right. The walls were soft cream, the yard wide enough for two little girls to run, and the kitchen filled with light each morning. He wanted Rachel close, not as an enemy, but as family who could still hold the children's world steady. The first days were clumsy, almost comical. He burned pancakes, folded shirts inside out, and forgot to buy the right brand of juice. But in those mistakes came laughter. Lucy giggled until she fell off her chair, and even Lila, shy and cautious, began to smile when she saw her father trying so hard. The house slowly filled with drawings on the fridge, toys scattered on the floor, and a warmth Nate had not felt in years. At night, the rhythm was new but comforting. He read the same book twice because Lucy begged, then checked the closet twice because Lila whispered she still feared the dark. He sat on the edge of their small beds, brushing back their hair, realizing that the silence of the house no longer carried emptiness but peace. The more he stumbled, the more the girls leaned into him, as if they understood that love was never perfect but always present. One night, after the lights were off and the world had gone quiet, Lila's small voice broke through. She asked if he would leave them like before. The words struck his heart sharper than any judgment in court. He pulled her into his arms, held her trembling shoulders, and whispered that he would never leave again. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. It was not just a promise, it was a rebirth, the start of a bond that no storm could break again. Life in the new house settled into a rhythm that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Mornings were filled with tangled hair, rushed breakfasts, and small backpacks bouncing against tiny shoulders as the girls skipped toward school. Evenings carried the smell of dinner in the kitchen, laughter spilling across the table, and bedtime stories that stretched longer than planned because Lucy always begged for one more. Emily's presence lingered in every corner. Her photo sat on a shelf where the girls could see her smile each day. At night, when fear crept in, Nate hummed the same lullaby Emily once sang, his voice unsteady but soft. He never tried to replace her. Instead, he told his daughters their mother was part of them forever, and his role was to make sure they felt safe, loved, and never alone. That truth gave them permission to hold on to their memories without fear. Rachel visited often at first, watching closely with her guard still raised. She wanted to be certain he wouldn't fail them again, but what she saw shook her resolve. She saw Lucy run into Nate's arms after school, chattering about her drawings. She saw Lila slip her hand into his without hesitation as they crossed the street. The girls' laughter filled the house in a way Rachel hadn't heard in years. Slowly, the anger she carried for so long softened into something gentler. One afternoon, Rachel stood quietly in the doorway as Nate chased the girls through the yard. The sun dipped low, painting the grass in gold. Lucy squealed as Nate scooped her up, spinning her until she laughed breathlessly. Lila, shy but smiling, clung to his arm as though she had never doubted his place in her life. Rachel's eyes burned as she realized she was witnessing the very thing Emily had hoped for her daughters, safe in their father's love. For Nate, every moment became a treasure. He laughed when Lucy tried to braid his hair with clumsy fingers, and his throat tightened when Lila asked him to sit beside her during a storm. The world of business and power felt like a distant memory. What mattered now was the fragile, beautiful rhythm of family and the sound of two little voices calling him Daddy. One evening, after the house grew quiet and the girls were asleep, Nate sat at the dining table with a journal open before him. He wrote down the day's moments: spilled juice, Lucy's giggles, Lila's shy smile. He paused, listening to the steady sound of their breathing down the hall. Warmth filled his chest, a peace deeper than anything he had ever known. Success, he realized, was not contracts or wealth. It was here, in the glow of a home where laughter lived again, in the bond of a father and two daughters who had finally found each other. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to Emotional Echoes, the place where true accounts and moving fiction come together to heal, uplift, and remind us of life's deepest values. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep your heart open. Don't forget to subscribe, Emotional Echoes, for more soul-stirring stories. Thanks for listening.